And Ephesians 2:14 tells us that for he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. And so what we're driving home here is that there is not a chosen bloodline of God's people. There is not a chosen nation or anything like that. But what Paul is making clear here, and this is what Paul's making clear here in his letter, as Mike touched on this last week, and we're touching on it again here. There's only one church, and Jesus is the head of that church. And Jews and Gentiles make up that church. And there is only one true Israel, and that is Jesus. And those who are chosen by God, both Jews and Gentiles, make up the true Israel and the true church throughout all generations, past, present, and future. Augustine said in regards to this, the new is in the old concealed, the old is in the new revealed. And so every single person who is a Christian is saved by faith alone in Christ alone. And this is why we see so much of Christ in Daniel in this moment, is because he is chosen by God to point people to the Christ who is ultimately to come. And so 1 Peter 2:23 says, when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. So while we see this in Daniel's story, Jesus is the perfect example of what we're talking about here. Jesus knew that he loved and spoke before the judgment of the Father, and he had no reason to judge because the Father would be the judge. And in addition, while Daniel and his friends were tempted here, Jesus was continuously tempted and tested throughout his life and his ministry. And we must always remember that there is nothing that is asked ultimately of us in this life, especially in the midst of pain, in the midst of hardship, that Christ has not already done on an incredibly greater and larger scale. Everything that we see that is good about Daniel ultimately points to Christ. And everything that is asked in Daniel's life, Christ did on a significantly larger scale. And that also applies to each one of us as well. When Christ calls us to suffer, Christ suffered much greater than we ever could. When we're tempted, Christ was tempted greater. When we go into exile, when we are cut off from communication from family and friends or whoever it was, we must remember that Christ endured that. And because Christ endured that, we are able to endure that.